Level Up Live, your home for life hacks, life lessons, all things positive and building a better you. I'm your host, Rob Robertson, owner of My Warrior Ethos Life Coaching here in Sierra Vista, broadcasting to you live from the Warrior Healing Center. And so the picture I'm seeing is a little blurry. I'm hoping that's not the case for you at home. If it is, I do apologize. I came in and everything was shut off. So I had to kind of give myself a quick crash course in how to turn everything on, and I hope I got everything turned on in the right order because I walked through the door with about 5 minutes to go. So so hopefully, worst case scenario, at least you can hear me. That's we'll go with that. So I hope everybody's doing well. The last couple of weeks have been better for me. I finally got my move to Tombstone taken care of, so I'm over there full time now. Um, so I got that off my plate. Still waiting to start my doctorate program at Liberty. I can't start that until May 15th. I'm gonna have to catch it on the next cycle because I won't get my paperwork in from American Military University for my master's degree. Won't be conferred upon me until the 1st of April. So a nice April Fool's joke there. I guess maybe they'll come back and say, oh, by the way, you haven't graduated yet. That's probably what they're going to do to me. God, I hope not. So that's about everything I got going on personally. I've had something kind of weighing on my mind in the last couple of weeks. We've had we lost a valuable team member here at Warrior Healing Center. And I nothing to do with anything with him as far as that goes, but it just, the things that he was interested in helping out with really kind of gave me some food for thought over the last couple of weeks. And what I want to talk about, particularly in terms of veterans, is how we deal with the PTSD, the mental illness, and everything else that comes with it that we see post service time. And one of the first things I want to say is that it's not an insurmountable task to face those issues and get them seen to and get help for them. I for one consider myself a success story. I just to kind of go back to the first episode of this I ever did, which was about November of last year. I talked about how I personally had went through a pretty rough patch there from about 2010 to about 2018, and when I first started my journey to getting myself lined to back out, what I didn't realize at that time was things would get worse before they got better, and that's just how things go sometimes, and that's what happened to me. So in 2013, my back I'd broken it in two places while I was in the Navy, and it finally came back to kind of haunt me in 2010, and just gradually got worse. And so in 2013, I went to the I can't remember now what they call it, but the Cochise Serving Vets event over at Cochise College, and I met a couple of guys over there who encouraged me to come to a group counseling session, and eventually I did do that, and that was kind of like the beginning of my recovery process. I always like to say I'm a recovering veteran, but anyway, that was kind of the beginning of my process, and in talking about what had happened to me while I was in and dealing with those issues. And it did get worse before it got better. That's for sure. So my back went bad in 2010, 2013. I started going to group counseling. By 2016, I think is when I finally kind of bottomed out with it, and started really making progress on getting back to a positive mindset versus a negative mindset. And so that came with a lot of group counseling, and it came with a few sessions of private counseling with a counselor I had at the time that was running our group. Made a few appointments with her, went and saw her privately, and discussed what was going on. But then I started getting myself involved in other things, and it worked out well for me because I stopped being so focused on what was being wrong with me and started being more focused on what was being right with me. And so I got involved in some things at the time. I was working for Sierra Vista Public Schools. I started a couple of different chess clubs at the time, just to get myself out of the house, and I got involved in more and more things. Then in 2018, I went and saw some better physical therapists that got me on a program to get my back lined out. And once I got my health started to go in the right direction, 2019, early part of that, or late 2018, was around Christmas time when they opened up Planet Fitness. I started going there several days a week, got my physical fitness back on track, and then about a year later, after that, I started working on my master's degree, which I just finished. So for me, it was a matter of finding balance between the personal day-to-day things, having something to keep my mind occupied on things, and then also realizing that the issues that I had physically and mentally were never going to go away, and they were embracing them as being part of me instead of fighting against them, which I found to be, I think, in the long run, what was causing me a lot of the problems that I was having. Is that anytime you have physical issues or anytime you have mental issues, one of the things you have to understand, that's part of who you are. You're never going to get completely rid of them. They're probably going to carry with you, especially the older you get on the physical side of things. I mean, ultimately, my back's never going to probably be 100% ever again. And so making that part of who I was, as opposed to, rejecting that as being my reality, really helped me out tremendously. And so, it's how we face those things that really does make a difference. And so I want to talk a little bit about that tonight, about, how can you as an individual start to look at these issues, and how can you start to incorporate them into being who you are every day, and then being able to face them. And I wanted to talk a lot about how to identify when something is becoming a problem as opposed to something you're actually dealing with, and some of the warning signs and stuff that we can look at, and how we can definitely face those and find help for ourselves, and get on the path to being quote unquote well again. So whenever we talk about mental illness, there's so many different things that go into it. I think the biggest one that affects most vets is that you hear about is either one of two, I should say, either PTSD or the depression, or both, depending on what you went through. Now, in my case, my diagnosis was depression. I tend to disagree with them a little bit on that. I think it's just sheer anger because of what happened to me while I was in, as far as the broken back, and then they really didn't do very much to care for it. And it ended up being a long-term, it's become a long-term problem because of that. So I deal with a lot of anger over that Navy medicine and then the VA, in my opinion, never really did anything to help, in my opinion, get it taken care of. It was actually civilian doctors eventually that kind of got me back on the right track. And even then, with civilian doctors, because I had them off and on after I got in the military, it was 2006 until 1996 until 2018 before I got with the right ones that could seem to understand or come up with a plan that worked. So it 22 years that I've dealt with this before I got on a situation that made it easier for me to deal with. So there's all that we have to put up with as well. But let's talk about some warning signs and some things that we need to look at whenever we are talking about when it stops being just an annoyance and really becoming a problem. The first thing they talk about is when thoughts, emotions, or behaviors are out of control, especially when they're affecting your relationships, your work, or your sense of well-being. Never feel embarrassed to ask for help at times when you're upset or depressed. And, I think that is one of the biggest things, particularly for veterans, when it comes to that, because we tend to be type A personalities. Even if you're not a type A when you go in, I think more often than not you're a type A when you come out. And so looking at asking for help sometimes can be, I think maybe sometimes we take it as a sign of weakness when it's not. There's nothing wrong for asking for help. There's nothing wrong with going to some outside service or something like that and find out what they provide or what they offer to help get you on the right track. I mean, yeah, I can tell you for me, probably that group counseling was the best thing I ever did with those guys. It was hard in the beginning to talk about it in front of a bunch of strangers, but then after I got to know them and realize one of the things that helped me was realizing in group therapy that there were other people going through the same thing that I was going through. So then I didn't feel so alone in dealing with it, that that they were also facing the same things. But you have to kind of watch and see it. You kind of got to police yourself a little bit, I guess, and also pay attention to what other people are saying to you if they're coming to you and saying, "Hey, man, it seems like you're dealing with some anger issues. I see that you look depressed." And don't just slough it off as not being the case. Listen to what other people are telling you, because just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't happening. And so it's a good idea to take that feedback and kind of listen to it and see what it's telling you. See if you can match it up, to be able to step outside the situation, turn your own emotions off for a minute and say, well, if I was another person looking at me, would I say or see that I'm struggling and having issues? And so, when you do begin to realize that, hey, you're kind of feeling out of control about things, that's the most important time to start seeking help. And we're going to talk about some things you can get help with here at the end. But, it's just important to be able to recognize that, something isn't right, maybe quite completely, and you need to start looking for avenues to deal with it. Next is when you are struggling to deal with life's painful challenges, such as a major illness, the loss of a loved one, divorce, or job problems. These issues may be your own, but could also include those of others you care about. So, we all deal with stressors every day. I mean, for anybody to sit there and go, well, I don't have any stressors, that's a bit of a lie. We all have all kinds of stressors every day. Some of them are chronic stressors, like I deal with chronic pain. Some of you have chronic sleep problems, chronic problems with PTSD, chronic problems with disability. But then you also have acute problems that crop up. Vehicle breaks down, plumbing problem in the house, roof leaks, just things that are genuinely annoyances, but at the same time they can tend to snowball on you. I remember one particular case that happened to me back in about 2017 when I kind of felt like I was really getting things lined out, and then all of a sudden it seemed like I had a lot of bricks coming at me at once. And so I went and sat down with my counselor and went over everything, and things weren't as bad as I was making them out to be. But for me at the time, it really did feel like things were snowballing out of control. So you kind of got to watch for that and say, okay, well, is what's happening snowballing out of control, or am I just being overreactive to things? Because either one could be the case. And again, you got to come back and say, well, do I need some help dealing with this? And don't be afraid to ask for it. But there are all kinds of things that we could wind up dealing with that make life difficult on a day in, day out basis. Obviously, there's health problems. You could be struggling to pay the day-to-day bills. Rent could be an issue. Car payments could be an issue. Maintenance issues around your house. You could have medical problems that involve another family member. That makes it a difficult struggle. I know several, people that have spouses that have cancer or something like that they have to, make trips to other places to get treatment. You might have a child that's struggling through some health issues, or maybe they're struggling at school and you're not real sure, how to help them. Things have changed so much since we were in school, sometimes trying to help that child out can be a real struggle. So, it does end up putting a lot of stressors on yourself. And, then there's the day-to-day stuff that you run into, just out in town driving, somebody cuts you off, it just adds fuel to a fire that's already, kind of smoldering. So, it's important to kind of pay attention to what struggles you're dealing with and what challenges you're dealing with, and make sure they're not, overwhelming you. We get into some alcohol and drug issues, and how that can interfere with your health, your emotions, your relationships, your job, or your ability to fulfill your daily responsibilities. So the big question you have to ask yourself: are you using alcohol and drugs to, as they say, self-medicate? Are you using it to dull pain? Are you using it to avoid responsibility? Are you drinking so much or taking drugs to the point that you can't function? Are you drinking and taking drugs to the point where you can't pay your financial responsibilities? Is it making it difficult for you to go to work and function? Are you particularly if you're in a safety sensitive job? I mean, where I work out, all our jobs are safety sensitive. We have a pretty robust drug testing policy. Are you in danger of popping hot on a random drug test, or are you in danger of having an incident where they send you in to do a drug test for cause to find out did the drug interfere with your ability to do your job? So and then if you're under the influence of mind altering substances, whether that's alcohol or drugs, are you making the best decisions you could possibly make? I mean, in my case, I go back and say that even just the pain alone that I was dealing with from the time I broke my back in '93 until 2018, whenever I got with the right doctors, that's 25 years, that I probably at times was not making the best decisions I could make because my mentality was so ruled by the pain that I was dealing with. Well, you'll find that if you're going to turn to alcohol and drugs to try to solve your problems. First of all, they're not going to solve the problem, and second of all, they're just going to create more problems that you really don't need. So you need to look at that and determine, is it really a recreational issue, or is this an issue you're doing to try to avoid responsibility or try to deaden the pain of what you're going through? And it's a tough conversation to have with yourself. And the other side of that coin is if you have somebody come up to you and say, "Hey, man, I see you doing all these things. They're not healthy for you," and a knee-jerk reaction is to be pissed off when somebody comes up and tells you that, and not taking that observation for what it's worth, and understand that person probably cares about you, and wants to see you around for a long time, because anytime you get into these issues with alcohol and drugs, you're not just affecting yourself, you're affecting the people around you. And what happens if you're on those alcohol and drugs, you make a decision, as they say, you make a long-term decision for a short-term problem, and you know what I'm talking about. So you're not doing yourself or the people around you any favors when you do those kinds of things that can affect you not being here. Let's just leave it at that. So again, get some help. If I can't stress that enough. I'm going to say it at the end of each one of these points. Get some help, and there's all kinds of places to get them from. Another is when you are confused, fraught with emotions, and need the perspectives of caring yet unbiased person to help sort among difficult choices. You need the perspectives of a caring yet unbiased person to help sort among difficult choices. So in other words, are you relying on somebody else to make decisions for you? That is another indication that maybe that the level and the amount of problems that you're trying to deal with is overwhelming you. And again, that's not saying that it's wrong to turn to that caring unbiased person to ask for their help. That's what we want you to do if you're getting overwhelmed. But the question is, are you dealing with your own problems on your own, or are you falling back on somebody else to make decisions for you? Again, sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing when, depending on what the situation is. But how long does that situation go on for? You don't want it to be a long-term thing. You want to be able to make your own decisions about your own life, because nobody knows what's best for you in many cases but you. We just got done talking about this last weekend at group here on Saturday, is that nobody knows you better than you. So somebody come along and help you out for a while in the short term, if you're having a hard time you feel like you're having a hard time making the best decisions for yourself, but you don't want it to become a long-term solution, because they don't have to ultimately live your life. Now you're stuck, sometimes maybe having to live with the decisions they make, and sometimes that's the way it is, and we all know how that works sometimes. We've all seen how that works sometimes with parents. We see how it works with kids, that we have to make the decisions for them because they're just not in a position to do so. But if you're in, you want to get it where you're making your own decisions for yourself ultimately. I mean, that would be the goal, So that's a thing to look at, to saying how much of my decision making am I doing on my own, and how much am I relying on somebody else to make those decisions for me. Last thing is when you feel that life is no longer worth living, that you are hopeless and have reached to the end of the line, and you would rather die than feel the pain of the present. In the midst of such distress, you are not prepared to make life or death decisions. Ask for help. I'm sorry. For me, in my positive mindset that I have, I just don't believe in the no-win scenario and in being hopeless. You can get out and make changes to make your life better. And it's going to be a struggle, and it's going to be a fight, and it's going to be hard, and it's not going to be fun. And, I can remember the early days of my turnaround back in 2018. Well, even before that, I should date that. Let's go all the way back to 2014. I think it's when I really started to turn things around, while I was working for the public school system. And, I ended up having a lot of time where I was off by myself, and I had to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations with myself about where I was at, what I was doing, and where I wanted to go. And as time went by, I began to realize that the lifestyle I was living was not good enough for me. That I was willing to settle for being in pain all the time. And I knew that wasn't right. But it did take me a few more years to get on the straight and narrow. And how it came to happen was my back flared up really bad, and I went back to see the doctor. At the time, I got in under the CARES Act, so they didn't have one over here at the CBOC here in Sierra Vista for me to see. They sent me out into the public. That public doctor got me to a public, a non-VA physical therapy group, and they were able to get me on the right plan to get me lined out again. And it was a process, and some days it really still is a process. I mean, my biggest thing as far as keeping my mentality squared away and keep myself physically active is my physical training. Now, those of you that have been fans of the show and tune in every time I do this, and every time I talk about it, I tell you straight out, no, there are times I do not like going to the gym. But I still manage to force myself to go in there even on the nights, that I'm just not feeling it. And I get in there and do the work that I feel that I have to do in order to keep myself squared away and keep myself on the straight and narrow. And so, is it fun? Absolutely, not all the time. Now, most nights, probably 70-80% of the nights I go in there, yeah, I enjoy the time that I spend in there. But there's that other 10 or 20%. That, man, it just sucks, and I'm already dreading it 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I don't go till 5. I really don't want to go in there. And yeah, I could certainly make an argument, well, I'm just missing one night, and it's not going to be a big deal. But the problem with that is you miss one night, then you miss 2 nights, then you miss 4 nights, then you miss 8 nights. You get the picture. So you have to push yourself to get those things done. But again, back to the original point, there's no point in feeling hopeless. No situation is unbeatable. There is a way to fix things. And you just have to be willing to put in the work. That's the whole thing right there. When I do sit down as a coach and I have talked to people and they have told me, man, I just don't feel like I can get through this. This seems insurmountable. What I find is it's not that the task is insurmountable. It's they're just not willing to put in the work to get through that task. And that's where the hitch comes in. You have to be willing to put in the work. You can't change that part of it. That's number one. Number two is you got to realize that there are people willing to help you. All you have to do is be willing to ask for it. And there are services all over the place. You don't have to carry that bucket of water by yourself. There are people who will help you come along and carry some of that load and carry some of that burden and help you get over the top. I found them, and I still lean on them. They're my brothers, that I go to group counseling with. They know exactly, how I feel about them. I've told them to their face. They're my family. And the four of them know, the 4 or 5, I guess it's 6 of them, know exactly who I'm talking about. And I'll, Moose, Ed, Bill, Dave, Steve. Am I missing anybody there? Moose, Ed. Yeah, I think that's all of them right there. But yeah, they were with me through a whole bunch of stuff, and I think the world of them. But yeah, don't make a long-term or decision for a short-term problem. It's not worth it. We can get you through it. There's that old saying that if God brings you to it, He'll bring you through it. So it's never insurmountable. So what are some specific things you can look at as far as specific symptoms that you might be having that might indicate that you're having a problem with stress or with PTSD, depression, all these things that it might be coming out in physical terms. Sleeping issues, probably number one. When I go to group counseling, most of the guys that I hear in there talking about the stuff that they're going through, it seems like it comes out in their sleep. Can't sleep during the night, can't sleep all the way through the night, or they're constantly on alert. We see that a lot with PTSD, is that constantly being on alert. Nightmares, even if they do get to sleep, they can't manage to make it, through the night, because the nightmares are horrible. Again, that getting woke up every couple of hours because, even if you get to sleep that long, is another thing that we see. Irritability or anger. Again, another big one I hear, when I'm sitting in some of those counseling sessions with guys, they talk about, that having that uncontrollable anger that they just can't seem to, A, they can't find a reason for it, and B, they can't find a reason to get out of it. So, it's when you see yourself having that uncontrollable anger that you can't tie to some specific thing, that's a pretty good danger sign right there that something's not right. Hypervigilance, I talked a little bit about that with the sleep issue. Are you constantly on alert about things? Are you constantly looking? Are you constantly saying, hey, what's going on? I find myself in that mode a lot, the hypervigilance. I can't sit, I'm like many of you, I can't sit with my back to a door. I'm checking everybody out that walks into a room. I can tell you where all the exits are. The list goes on for verbatim. You can't handle, real quick movements around you, et cetera, et cetera. So, isolation or emotional detachment. I have that problem sometimes with the isolation. My wife can usually tell whenever I need to isolate for a period of time. Kind of go off by myself for the day and maybe just sit and watch TV all day. And she's gotten pretty hip, I think, when I need to do that. And you used to be able to go on for several days, maybe even several weeks, but now really don't have it too often much anymore unless I'm just overtired, and sometimes I'll want to isolate. But I think it has more to do with fatigue than it has anything to do with anything psychological now. Severe anxiety, again, the nervousness, the hypervigilance, what's going on. Things seem to set you off a little bit more than what they should. Another symptom of maybe a larger problem. Intrusive thoughts or flashbacks. Remember back to negative things that happened maybe while you were in service, or negative things from your past. The uncontrollable thoughts. We talked a little bit about that. Things get in your head and you just can't get rid of them, for whatever the case may be. Eating disorders, nausea. You can't eat because you're nauseated, or you just can't eat. Period. For no appetite. Weight loss is another one you got to kind of keep an eye on. Fatigue. Of course, for me, I say fatigue now, as far as wanting to isolate, but a lot of times my fatigue is just because I push myself a little bit harder. Like I said, I'm involved in a lot of stuff now. And sometimes I don't know physically if I can keep myself going. I probably tend to overextend myself now to try to, avoid some of the stuff. Keep myself in a positive mindset so I don't sit around and dwell on negative things. So, and in some cases, I think sometimes I'm my own worst enemy. Chronic pain is another one to keep an eye on. I think where the chronic pain comes in, I think most veterans deal with that anyway. We get asked to do things that just aren't normal, whether it's jumping out of planes or sliding down ladders or climbing into tanks or whatever the case may be. You get asked to do things that just no normal human would do. I remember, an admiral one time saying that, most military people, by the time they go through all their physical training and everything else, in all reality, end up becoming world-class athletes to some degree. And that's a lot of stress to put on the body. So years later, it kind of has to show up in terms of aches and pains and whatnot. But definitely your mental state can affect that ache or pain and make it better or worse depending on, where your mentality's at. Headaches, boy, if sleepless issues are number one, headaches got to be number two. The stress, and all these other issues I've talked about, particularly when you're talking about hypervigilance, the irritability and the anger, you're not sleeping well, having problems with eating, chronic pain, all that stuff, that's going to cause you to have a headache, whether you got that problem or not. So, a lot of your other health issues will drive having a headache anyway. Stress in particular, if you're allowing yourself to get stressed out, I don't think anything will cause a headache faster. So, TMJ, I remember back in boot camp, they used to talk about that a little bit, or back in when you were in the service, the TMJ, the problem with the jaw, because when you sleep at night, you're under a lot of stress and pressure, and you tend to bite down, and when you bite down, you put a lot of stress on that jaw, and causes the jaw to hurt. That's just where it comes out in that sleeping issue again. You're under a lot of pressure, and so what happens is you tend to sleep tense, and you tend to wake up the next morning probably still as tired as you were when you laid down, and a lot of times it comes out in your jaw. So what are some things you can do to get around this? Well, obviously family members or friends are, always the first outlet, I think, being able to talk to somebody. If you really are having those ideations of suicide or hurting yourself or hurting your others, 911 obviously ought to be your first stop. If it's really that severe and really that serious, call 911, get some help immediately. 988 is the Veterans Crisis Line. You can just simply dial 988. They'll take you right to that. The operators are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I do believe, to speak to you. If you feel like you do have time to, it's a problem you want to deal with, but something you feel you kind of got time to deal with. Well, on the one hand, don't wait too long, but on the other hand, there are services out here that are available. Your first stop, obviously, right here at the Warrior Healing Center. Come on down and talk to these folks. I think there's somebody told me the other day, there's like 34 different service providers that work in and out of this place, and maybe I'm wrong about that number. But Warrior Healing Center is a great resource for our area. Please use it. Their number's right there, scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Write it down, put it in your phone, give them a call and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. How can you help? Or just walk in the front door out here. There's always, there's usually somebody sitting out there in the front that can help you and get you on the straight and narrow. A couple other things to talk about here at Warrior Healing Center. There's a couple of groups that meet Thursday evenings at 6:30 and then Saturday mornings at 9:30 that are group counseling sessions. So, you walk in and attend one of those. I mean, that's where I started out, was going to group counseling. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't say a lot in the early days when I was going to group counseling. It took me a while, a month or two before I finally started telling my story and talking about my journey and getting that started. So, definitely attend those if you have the time. Come in and you're going to talk to people that are experiencing the same thing you are. They're not dealing with anything any different than you are. And that would help me out a lot in the early days, was find out, hey, I'm not the only one dealing with this. I've got a room full of people here. They're all telling the same story that I've been dealing with. I thought I was all by myself. So anyway, so group or peer support. See, next time you go in for your annual physical with the VA, if that's where you do it, or you go see a private doc or whatever, bring it up to your primary care. Say, hey, I'm having these problems. You got anything you can help me out with here? And then of course, last but not least is the VA. Go see the VA. I know a lot of us have problems and issues with them, but you got to start somewhere, and that's a good place to begin as well. So plenty of resources there, and then you got me right here every 2 weeks, right here Tuesdays. Show up, watch the show. If you need help, I'll come to where you're at and talk to you. Send me an email, mywarriorethosaZ@gmail.com, mywarriorethosaZ@gmail.com, or get a hold of them up here at the front desk. Call My Warrior Ethos. Say, hey, I want to talk to that Rob guy that does that Level Up Live show. And I'll come to you if I have to. I will absolutely come to you, and we'll talk. We'll find an answer. Okay? The biggest thing for you to remember is you're not alone. You got a lot of help. All you got to do is ask for it. Enough on that. Let's do some healthy, wealthy, and wise, shall we? This one's going to fall under the wise category, I think. So last Friday was St. Patty's Day, and I probably should have done this before, and I got a little bit of a chuckle out of it myself. But here are 15 things to know about St. Patty's Day. Number 1, St. Patrick's Day is an Irish national holiday with banks, stores, and businesses closing for the day. I'm sure everybody probably knew about that one. Not surprising. Number 2, the first St. Patrick's Day celebration in the United States was held in Boston in 1737. So St. Patty's Day has been celebrated here longer than the country has been in existence. Number 3, shamrocks are the national flower emblem of Ireland. Number 4, the color of St. Patrick's Day was originally blue. I did not know that. Wearing green has become a staple of St. Patrick's Day, but the holiday was originally associated with the color blue. It's thought that the shift to green happened because of Ireland's nickname, the Emerald Isle. The green in the Irish flag and the shamrock or clover. Green ribbons and shamrocks were worn as early as the 17th century. Number 5, beer is one of the most widely consumed beverages on St. Patrick's Day. Duh. Oh, goodness. Number 6, legend says that each leaf of the clover has a meaning: hope, faith, love, and luck. Number 7, 1962 marked the first time Chicago dyed their river green for St. Patrick's Day. So that's been going on for 60 years now that they've been dyeing the river green. I thought that was interesting. Guinness, number 8, Guinness is one of the most popular drinks on St. Patrick's Day. Actually, there are 34 different recipes for Guinness beer. Only the Irish. Shamrock shakes are also very popular and tasty. So I have to tell you this story. So where I work out at Barnett's Towing and Propane, my staff I'm the office manager there. Every year for the last couple of years, I had bought them all Shamrock shakes. So last Wednesday, they went to great pains to remind me that it was Shamrock Shake time of the year again. And so now it has become a Barnett's tradition now that the office manager buys Shamrock Shakes for the crew. Yeah, that would be me. That's okay. I like doing it. Great bunch of folks. I love working there. There are 34.7 million U.S. residents with Irish ancestry. That's number 10. This number is more than the 7 times the population of Ireland itself. So we have more Irish here in the United States than they have in Ireland. Number 11, the real St. Patrick wasn't Irish. He was born in Britain around AD 390 to an aristocratic Christian family. Number 12, your odds of finding a 4-leaf clover are about 1 in 10,000. Number 13, the world's shortest St. Patrick's Day parade is held in an Irish village. It lasts only 100 yards between the village's 2 pubs. Yeah, because we don't want to hold up the drinking on St. Patrick's Day. Number 14, to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Well, we already said that. Chicago dyes the river green for a few hours. I don't know why they put that in there a second time. Number 15, St. Patrick never got canonized by a pope, making his saintly status somewhat questionable. So I hope you had a wonderful St. Patty's Day. So that's all I have for this week's edition, or this go-round's edition. I will be having my first guest in studio next meeting, which is going to be on. See here, let me double check that before I give you bad information. Will be the first Tuesday of next month. This is going to be one you're going to want to tune into. You want to find out what it's going to be about, you're going to need to stop by the show here. Where's my calendar? You never can find things on these electronic devices. You ever wonder what we did before we had these things? Okay, we'll be on April the 4th. April the 4th at 5:30. First in studio guest will be here. I can tell you it's an important topic. It's something you're going to want to hear. Basically the entire episode will be a healthy, wealthy, and wise episode. So please tune in. I promise you, we're going to give you some tools that you can use and some reasons maybe you're going to want to come down here and get some stuff taken care of. It doesn't matter what your status is, in terms of anything other than just taking care of your future and making sure your family's taken care of. So please be here. Until next time, what I always say, fortune favors the bold. Always does. That's what they tell me. Dream big, dare to fail, because fortune always favors the bold. Hey, y'all have a good couple of weeks. I'll see you on April the 4th right here at 5:30. Take care of each other, and I'll see you then.